Kiera Chambers, Vice President with Peadbo. I'm here with the co-founder and CEO, as well as the co-founder and CCO of Peadbo. And welcome to the roundtable. Before we get started, I'll let them do some introductions. So, Keith, could you introduce yourself to the audience?
Absolutely. Hey, everybody. I am Keith Chaney. As Kiara mentioned, I am the co-founder and CEO of Peadbo. Originally from Flint, Michigan, currently based in Washington, D.C., where I live with my wife and my two beautiful daughters.
Hello, everyone. I am Ashley René Lee, and I am the co-founder and chief communications officer for Peadbo. I'm also born in Flint, Michigan. I currently reside in Grand Rapids, Michigan, with my husband and my two babies, Emery and Evan. I am, a wife, a mom, a daughter, woman of faith, all those good things, and just happy to be here with y'all.
Wonderful. Thank you both for being here. So you might be wondering, what is Peadbo? Peadbo is a platform dedicated to helping individuals build and leverage personal advisory boards through their career journey and navigating all the complexities of their personal and professional life. And so I brought these two here today to kind of talk about their journeys and the origin story of Peadbo. And could one of you talk a little bit about your journeys first, and how'd you come to this place in your professional career, and how your personal advisory board supported that? So, Ashley, could we start with you first?
Sure. As I mentioned, I am from Flint, Michigan. I am actually have the privilege and honor of being Keith's big sister, and I am, from a blended family. I am the oldest of, how many of us is it? 5. Yeah, there's 5 total.
Wow.
Yeah, 5 total. And
Wow.
and so just from like a big, beautiful blended family, and am among the first in my family to complete college and chart out in my, chosen career path. I am like a communication professional and strategist, and I'm the first in like among the people that I knew to do the work that I'm doing professionally. And so has been a journey. I, started off as a journalism major, and I graduated in the middle of the recession, and so had to really quickly think about how I needed to pivot in order to still use my passions, as a writer and a communicator to like feed myself, right? So I transitioned into strategic communications and public relations. I had the opportunity to work in Washington, D.C., New York, in higher ed in Michigan, and now I'm working in a nonprofit space. And so what has been really critical for me from not having someone who I had already charted, the path professionally that I wanted, is to like be really intentional of like building a strong network of supporters around me, like, and being creative on what that looked like, because my career path wasn't linear. I had to think about like, who were folks doing things similar to what I wanted to do. And then I think, just realistically, as a Black woman, who didn't want to just focus on career, but really desired balance, I also had to think about, people in my life who were doing that well, who had family and prioritized that and had healthy boundaries. I did not want to succumb to the myth of the strong Black woman can do all things and not take care of ourselves. So like balance was also, I think, as important, if not more so, for me professionally. And so I've just, had to tap into different folks in my communities, the intersections of those communities, to really like build a solid network of folks who I can count on and be vulnerable and transparent with, and who are going to, most importantly, tell me the truth. So with their support and, prayers of my family and all that, I'm here and I'm thriving, and I don't feel like I'm out here by myself, which I think is, for me, what success looks like. So.
I love that. I love that. So now I'm curious, because I have heard some of both of your paths now, and I'm kind of curious how your path, Keith, was very different from Ashley's, and how it was for you and then your journey, and essentially being in your professional career leading up to now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think you'll hear some similarities, but you'll also hear some differences. Yeah, I excelled in math and science growing up, and so everyone pretty much encouraged me to go into engineering because if you're good at math and science, that's just what you do apparently. And so I went on to get my degree in industrial engineering, and I think one of the first kind of forks in the road for me was realizing junior year I don't want to be an engineer. And so I had kind of gone down paths that weren't my own. And so once I graduated, I went against everyone's advice and I applied to go straight to business school. Fortunately, I had done well enough on the GMAT and had done enough co-op work in my undergrad to get into a few schools, one of which being Carnegie Mellon University. And so I went to CMU, got my MBA. And because I didn't know what I wanted to do, I, of course, went into consulting because you don't have to choose yet.
Mm-hmm.
And while I had been successful on paper of the path that I was on, I quickly realized that there were just some dinner table conversations that, unfortunately, my parents weren't able to have with me because they hadn't worked in a place like McKinsey or in corporate. My dad spent over 2 decades working in a juvenile facility. So, counseling young men who, had made mistakes, but helping them to recognize that they had options and that they could kind of change the trajectory of their lives. And my mom worked for the county and the local bank. So they worked hard. They had great experiences, but there was an element of, once I graduated from college, almost okay, well, you got it from here because you're going somewhere that we haven't been. And I think also there's a mindset that we as men specifically adopt of not asking for help. And so I was early in my career, I just figured, okay, work hard, grind mentality, and I'll succeed. And I learned the hard way that's not how it works. You have to be intentional about building a supporter system around you. You have to raise your hand and ask for help when you need it and not suffer in silence. And so as I slowly figured that out while bumping my head along my journey, I knew that I needed mentors. I knew that I needed guidance, but I was interested in this model or this kind of thing people would occasionally talk about, which is like your mastermind group or your personal board. And I started to kind of take that practice of building my board, and I found it really changed how everything worked because I suddenly had people who could say, yeah, I remember when that happened. This is what I did, and this is how it worked, or this is what I would have done differently. And so I no longer had to go in blind in a lot of the situations I found myself career-wise. And so with that, I had this crazy idea of building a tool to make it easier for people to build and manage their own boards. And the first person I called was, of course, my big sister to ask her if it was stupid. And this time she didn't say yes, as she offered to help me to do pilots. And, we really were scrappy, in our early days. We would get anybody who would jump on a Zoom call and we would talk to them about this personal board thing and try to coach them through how they could build one without a platform. There was no software. There was no tool. It was just kind of us and some PowerPoint slides and passion. But we saw that the people who actually did it, and not everyone did, they would call us and say, wow, this is amazing. Like, I just had a meeting with, 3 or 4 people who I really admire. And now I have like clarity on what I want to do next. And so I think some of those early wins were kind of the fuel behind us, really deciding to pursue this thing.
Thank you for that. And I'm going to give some flowers to your parents because amazing work that they're doing. And also, I love the fact that you were just a little bit vulnerable, both of you, and talking about how challenging it can be just trying to navigate the professional realm and being a first generation professional, right? And so I'm glad that we are able to have an opportunity to speak to you both about Peadbo and how that really, it can leverage right, can really support you throughout your professional journey. So Ashley, could you speak a little bit about like your experience working with your brother, developing Peadbo and how it came to be?
I think, this was, we were still navigating, the pandemic when Keith first came to me with the idea. And I think it was something that I was, definitely the concept of it had, we both unofficially had been practicing this in so many ways. And I think our experiences and journeys have been different professionally. Definitely a solid foundation in terms of like our upbringing. But I think this experience of working together has really, I think, brought us closer in a sense of just enhanced level of just respect and appreciation and admiration. I think it's definitely been a switch of roles because him as our CEO, like he's kind of like my boss in some ways, and so as the big sister, that can be interesting. But I'm really proud of him.
Hence interesting. I love the interesting.
Yeah, she doesn't talk to me like people talk to their boss. It's still very
I'm
much like,
insubordinate in some way, but
yeah, she's still very much big sister.
I will say that I just appreciate his grit and his resilience, and I the last few years have been just tough on the world, right? It's been a tough
Mhm.
time. Like this is a moment, and so I
Right.
think there's been lots of things that could have easily we could have given up and we could have been like, it's not the time. And I think he is just has been that constant reminder of like, no, this isn't really just about us. This is about, how do we make it easier and change the trajectory of other for someone else? How do we send that
Right.
elevator back down? The stuff that we had to figure out the hard way. How do we make it accessible and how do we normalize and socialize this idea of like, our tagline is self-made is a myth. And so he's been just a great motivator and encourager. And so I just like, mad respect, right? Like I love him, but like I really love after just this experience and just respect his hustle and his grit and resilience. And I mentioned before, like throughout since Peadbo has been birthed, I have birthed two babies, and I'm navigating an executive leadership role. That I do by day, and so just the balance of it all. There's been lots of times, and I think the rest of our co-founders, like life has lifed, and there's been
Mhm.
lots of times where we could have tapped out, but Keith keeps us going. So it's been a really great experience for me in that regard. So,
Oh,
A relentless leader.
right,
oh man,
don't cry.
don't cry. I got to keep it G. But no, I think Ashley talked about something that's important, and I think it's important that we mention this. As a team working on a startup, and that's that the journey hasn't been this romanticized up and to the right, amazing VC backed unicorn journey. It's been muddy. It's been tough. When we started this thing, I was working at Google right after we finished Techstars accelerator program. Like literally, like I think the next week, I got the email while I was picking my daughter up from daycare that I didn't have a job anymore.
Mhm.
And so, how our feelings toward Google, I understand how business works, but that was really a sink or swim moment for us. But I think it was also, I think this is my personal beliefs coming out. I think it was God telling me, all right, I want you to focus on people for at least however much time you're able to without having to juggle. And so the severance and then, just the investment that allowed me to spend about 2 years full time in this, helping us to secure our first paying customers, multiple iterations of the platform. While it's still far from perfect, it's still far from the vision in my head. We've been able to impact some lives, and that's been amazing.
Mhm.
So now I find myself back juggling. It's still really cool to see someone talk about their board meeting or to receive a newsletter that was sent via Peadbo and someone just thought enough for me to share a life update. And so, it hasn't been fast, but the impact has been real. So I think it's been awesome to see, but also to learn that you don't have to compare yourself to everybody else's journey. Just kind of focus on your mission and trust the process. And so I appreciate the team for not being too vocal with their doubts as things got crazy. Be behind the wheel. So I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you both for really talking about how just essentially the journey of Peebo and how amazing and just those milestones that you all achieved getting here to this point. My next question before I think I have a couple of questions before we go for the day. Who has been a key player on your personal advisory board and how have they made a lasting impact on your just personal professional journey and life? And I'll start with Ashley.
Okay. I think as I reflect on this, we ask this question a lot. to folks. And I think for me in this moment, and that's also what we talk about with people. People come in and out of their role on your board. And I will have to shout out my friend Janine. She is a friend and colleague, and we often talk about the importance of a peer on your board. So someone who is kind of navigating some of the same things as you, who you can, swap stories with. And so I would say she is kind of like that, plays that peer role, and then also that cheerleader role. Like, you got this. Like, you are a boss and a baddie. Like, yes, you got, a
You
baby on
do.
your hip and a toddler on your leg, but like, you can do this. Remember who you are. And I think um, her also having small children as well during this season, and being like a rock star professionally, I think has been an example of, for me, of like, yes, I can do this. Like, we are in the trenches, but someone who I can, gives me very solid advice and is there to kind of also cheer me on when I'm doubting myself. And it's not just because, these are buzzwords that she's saying, but like, she's living it too. And so in this season of my life in particular, she's definitely been a very, very valuable member of my board.
Right. And there's like a whole nother of empathy that she has for what you have going on too.
Absolutely.
Um, what about you, Keith?
So if you come to mind, I think the one that's top of mind right now is a gentleman named David, guy from Michigan. He actually was one of our assigned like mentors during Mentor Madness when we were going through Techstars. And one thing about me is like, if I like you, or like if I find like that our relationship is something that's valuable, I'm not gonna let you go because like the constraints of some program or whatever have ended. And so Techstars was 3 months. David has been my board member for coming up on 3 years.
Wow.
And so he's literally been on my board, meaning like, when I have board meetings with the full group, he's one of them. But also we have a standing bi-weekly or at least monthly check-in where, between dropping my daughters off at school and either going to the office or going to the gym, he knows I'm going to call him, and it's very much like what we talking about today. And we've broken bread in Michigan and DC. He's out here often. We always make sure we meet up, but he's truly become like one of my most trusted confidants. And he's run startups. He actually is running one right now, and so we get to vent about that. We're both fathers, so we get to talk about that. I mean, it's just been an amazing relationship with someone who just truly wants to see me win, like in all aspects of life, and I want the same for him. And so occasionally I find myself being the coach on the call as he's going through his own stuff, and I think that's exactly how it should be.
Yeah, organic and authentic. And I think that's the biggest thing or takeaway of like working here at Peadbo and working with the customers is that we have these authentic relationships and we have this platform to like really allow something like that to cultivate those kind of relationships. I always ask this question to the folks I'm interviewing. Who is one person, dead or alive, who you would invite to be on your board? I'll start with you, Ashley, since Keith went already.
Oh, this is a hard one. And again, it varies by season, right? Depending on like what I'm navigating. I think it's still like Oprah. And I say that because, not because, she's
You're a
on
good one.
TV, but I think as a communicator and a storyteller, I think she has just found a remarkable way to use different mediums to, to elevate, people's stories and to inspire and to influence and inform. And I think at my core, I feel like that is what I was put on this earth to do, and have had the ability to do it in different ways. And so I would just love to, just get some of her wisdom and her, that Oprah touch on
Right.
projects that I'm working on.
Oprah's a good one. Very good one.
Mhm.
Keith?
Like Ashley said, this changes for me often, but there are two people who never seem to leave like the answer. So I'm going to say both. The first is Reid Hoffman. He is the CEO, or he was the CEO, but he founded LinkedIn. And it's because he often talks about the startup of you, and even occasionally talks about your personal board of directors. And so he's someone who I know understands this thing, but also has, unique insights around connections and relationships that I would love to pick his brain about. And the second is Stacey Brown Philpott. So she was the CEO of TaskRabbit. She's from Detroit, but also I think last week they just announced she's kicking off a VC firm, and she's raised I think 120 some million to
Wow.
support underrepresented founders. And so I've met her a few times, like we've actually talked, but every time I hear her name, she's doing something dope. And so she's just, someone I would definitely want on my board.
Stacy, I hope you hear this video.
Stacey and Reed, he keeps that a spot for you.
Right.
He on enough boards. He like, I do real boards.
Thank you both for the really just vulnerable conversations and discussions, and just the diamonds that you just dropped throughout this whole discussion as well. Thank you all for listening to the Roundtable with Peadbo. You should be able to like and subscribe. We'll have some details for you to connect with us after this video, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Have a good one, everyone.
Bye.